Hi, welcome to Tiny Piano Club. Today on the channel we have questions from non-religious people for religious professionals. My name is Zach and I happen to be a religious professional, and I'm here in beautiful California with...
I am Matt. I am also a religious professional.
I asked for questions on the Yik Yak, and so some of them are incredibly mean, but we're going to ask religious professionals these questions, and we'll see what happens, and it'll be great. It'll be so much fun and insightful for everybody. Orange Shovel says, if there is an omnipotent, all-powerful God, why, actually they say, what does so many terrible things happen? I think they mean, why do so many terrible things happen? As a religious professional, I like to say that I'm not very good at answers, but that I can help people ask more helpful questions. I don't think it's as clear-cut as their questionnaire as Orange Shovel made it out to be, right? That crop failures, that AIDS, that many of these terrible things that happen are not completely separate from human actions. And so if we can just figure out first all of the terrible things that happen because of the things we do, I think that's probably the more helpful question right now.
We live in a lot of denial of why bad things exist. I mean, all kinds of people are like, poverty, what are you gonna do? But it's like, well, actually, we created these systems that exacerbate it, and we're not really willing to look that in the eye. And I think that's true of a lot of things. There's also the question of this being that we talk about. But we also tell a particular story about that being. In the story that we tell, that being could have snapped that being's fingers and fixed everything, but chose not to. Instead, chose to come and suffer those things with us. I don't know if that's a more satisfying answer. It may not be, but that is we tell a different story than that.
Excellent non-answer, which is what religious folks are good at. Christianity, the result of a woman getting pregnant out of wedlock and creating up a marvelous story to save herself from being stoned to death. My hot take on this is that I think what this question does is it lifts up an assumption that's being made that was made in the earlier questions, right? The difference between truth and fact. And we like to think that they're the same thing, but they're definitely not. Is this story factual? Is Christianity factual? I have no idea. But is that what's really important about the story? I would say no, that what's really important about the story is that it proclaims truth.
Yes, and it does have a real impact on the world, right? For example, the civil rights movement was in part based on an interpretation of those stories that were referenced right there in that question. Were those stories true? Whether they were true or not, they were used to make amazing change. That is true, and that is even factual. I can't verify the 2,000 years ago facts, but I can see the truth that we live every day.
Why take the Bible for fact and not for moral guidelines?
They are stories, right? And I don't mean to say that in a light or dismissive way. I actually do think that these stories, for me as a religious professional in the Christian tradition, I believe that these stories hold more truth for me than other stories do, right? I think that's true. But to also emphasize the fact that they are stories, it's not a science book. It's a story book. Can I talk about dragons for a moment?
Oh, please talk about dragons. Nobody asked us about dragons this week,
it's
so
really
I'm glad
crazy.
You're bringing it in.
So one of our favorite authors, Neil Gaiman, has this quote where he says that fairy stories, and I'm not implying the scriptures are fairy stories, but he says this amazing thing where he says that fairy stories are really important, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. So I think that the Bible does a similar thing in that it doesn't necessarily tell us that dragons exist. It may or may not, but that's not the important question. The important question is whether dragons can be beaten. Thanks for watching the video. Be sure to subscribe to watch videos every Tuesday and Friday here on Tiny Piano Club.
And also in the comments, let us know if you're a non-religious person, if you might be a non-religious person, if you're a religious person. Put a question down there for a religious professional, and you'll hear us not give you a direct answer to your question, but try to rephrase your question in a way that we think might be more constructive and helpful.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that 500 years ago, or whenever, do you think that Bach had a tiny organ club?
Oh, it's the most Lutheran question ever.
It sounds kind of dirty, though.
It does sound kind of... Huh.